All right, good morning. I'm going to take it kind of slow this morning because I forgot to send out the link for today's Teams meeting, so I just sent it out. So we may have people joining us a little bit later than normal, and that's totally fine. All right, today is day 35 of our online AWD1000 Web Development Technologies class. The idea today is I sent you out the first pretest. And the idea was originally going to be that I was going to have you work on it for about an hour and a half, and then I was going to go over it. Well, it's fairly complex. Actually, the pretest probably would have been better given after we gone over 4 and 5, but I'd like to go over it anyway. All right. So the plan is, as it says, we will go over and kind of do this test together as a class starting now. All right. We're also going to go over homework problem number 1, and there should be time for us to take a quick look at my version of the box test also. All right. Tomorrow, students are going to take their first hands-on test. Now, the logic on this test tomorrow, in my opinion, for whatever that's worth, it's not difficult, but there'll probably be a few things you're asked to do on here that you may find a little difficult. That said, if you pay attention today, all right, to what we're doing, hopefully that'll really help you. So tomorrow by 7 a.m., I will have the JavaScript first test, JS Hot 1. We will go over it from 8:05 until 8:20. The rest of the period will be lab. I'll be online, of course, if you need help with something. But the test will be due tomorrow night. All right, Tuesday, 10/17 by midnight. Then on Wednesday and Thursday, we'll go over chapters 4 and 5 of our book. Now, chapter 5 is short. We'll probably cover that in close to half an hour. Chapter 4 is not. It's much more extensive. So we're going to go over several things in chapter 4 that will be new. All right. So again, last time, the first JavaScript test will be given tomorrow. You'll have all period to work on it, and it'll be due by midnight tomorrow night. All right. The JavaScript chapters 1 through 3 homework, which we basically did together, those will be due by midnight on Wednesday. Now, when I say the homework, it's the homework and it's the written tests. I should have been more specific. I wasn't, but it is both homework and written tests. All right, are due Wednesday by midnight. All right, so with that said, what I'm going to do first, and this is going to be a little bit different. All right. Aaron, let's see, you asked, I noticed the link to Teams was missing. Yeah, I just did send that out. That was on me. So this first test is going to be concentrated on chapters 1, 2, and 3. Even with that said, not much on 1. Most of it will be on 2 and 3. All right. Now, I'm saying this to you. I'm not making any apologies or anything else. I didn't write this test that you're going to take tomorrow. So if there's certain problems in there that do not make sense, it'll be your responsibility to ask me. All right, what doesn't make sense? All right. I wouldn't have written it this way. I had my own version. I was outvoted. All right. And the version that we're using is the version that the other instructors came up with. All right. Then the plan is, like I said, Wednesday and Thursday, we'll go over chapters 4 and 5. All right. Then next week, we'll go over 6 and 7. We may just have one more test. I don't know if we'll have one on 4 and 5 and another on 6 and 7, or just have one big test. You know, most people would say, oh, geez, I'd rather have just one test. So we might go over 4 and 5 over them Wednesday and Thursday. Friday will be a lab. Then we may have a test early next week. All right. And then 6 and 7. Okay. The good news is, as far as I'm concerned, those next 1 or 2 will be your last hands-on tests. all right? Because after we go through 8, 9, 10, and 11, I think what we'll do is we'll just write a website as a class. Will you have to turn it in? That's going to be up to you, all right? I think what I'll do is I will work on it, but I don't think I'm going to put it out there as a GitHub repo. All right. That way, if people want to do it themselves, they can. And if they don't want to, they don't have to. All right. We'll do that after we go through the jQuery stuff. There will not be a test on the jQuery stuff. I'm not even going to give you any homework. I'm not going to give you any written tests or anything on that. All right. We'll probably spend 1 week total going over 8, 9, 10, and 11. All right. Then I'm going to jump into, as you see right there, the advanced stuff. Okay, now there'll be stuff in there that'll probably make little to no sense. So again, the plan is not to give you any tests on that. When I say not any tests, I mean not any hands-on tests. I am going to ask that when we get to this stuff, because this is pure JavaScript, that at least on some of that stuff, there will be homework and or written tests. We'll talk about that later. All right. When we get done with that, we're going to go into a different subject that's not even in your book. The different subject that we will go into is something that's called React, R-E-A-C-T. I will spend a period explaining what React is, and we'll create an application or two in React. You will not be responsible for anything. There'll be no tests on React. There'll be no written tests on React. There'll be no homework on React. But the reason that we're doing that is React is a very big component for the people who next semester will be taking the AWD1111 database-driven website development class. And if you don't take that class next semester, then you're going to be taking it either in summer or in fall of 2024. All right, so it's something that everybody will have to go over. Finally, during the last week of class, I'm going to go over this stuff. And again, no homework, no labs, no nothing on that, just so you've got an idea of what's going on. Okay, all right, so with that said, I'm going to do this a little bit differently. And what I mean is, I'm going to show you for each one of these programs that we're going to work with today, I'm going to show you the finished product. And all I mean is I'm going to run them for you. That's it. Now, don't worry if they don't make a lot of sense or anything else right now. All right. So let me bring each one of them up, and I'll bring them up in code. All right. So the first one that we're going to do is it's going to work with index or BMI. And again, we'll talk about what that is, etc., in just a bit. But the idea is this. It's an unbelievably simplistic interface. There's a button on it. That's all there is. So when you run this, all you're going to see in the upper left-hand corner is a button. There it is. And it says calculate. And I don't know why it's not working. That isn't good. But when it comes up, let's see if I can run it the other way. I don't have any idea why that wouldn't be showing. Let's see, maybe I put the wrong version in here. Well, I want to show you a working version of it, so I've got to find out where I put that. Let's see. I've got it right here, so don't worry about it. We'll see it right now. All right. So there it is. Yeah. Is that it? Yes, that is it. So let me go to this bmi.html file, and it's exactly what I showed you it would be. In that, it is just a button. All right, you click the button, and it says to you, please enter a height that's between 12 and 96 inches. And if I put in something that's bad, so I put in garbage, it comes back and it just asks you to do it again. If I enter a height that's less than 12, it again just asks you to do it again. If I enter a height that's bigger than 96, it asks you to do it again. And it's not doing anything other than giving you a message. So I'm going to just put in about 5 or 6 values in here. So I'm going to say 72. So a person's 6 feet tall. How much do they weigh? 111 pounds. And it says they're underweight. And do I want to run it again? Yes. And I'm going to say 72. And again, I'll put in 150 pounds. And again, it says they're a good weight for their height. They're an optimal weight. All right. So I'm going to run it again. And I'm going to say they're 72 and they're 200 pounds. Now they're overweight. One last time, I'll say 72. And I'll say they weigh 330. Whoops. Well, I stopped. But you can see I've got final totals. So I'm counting how many people are underweight, how many people are overweight, how many people are of optimal weight, and how many people are obese. All right. And we'll explain all this stuff in just a minute, but that's the first one. All right. Then next, we're going to write or run another program. So let me close this and let me close this. We're going to do this guessing game. All right. And with this guessing game, again, it may make very little sense to you. It's okay. It's going to have the same ugly interface. It'll have just a button on it. And it says, please guess a number between 1 and 100. So I'll say 50. And it says 50 was too low. Please try again. And I'll say 75. 75 is too high. Please try again. 66. Too high. 60. There, it took me 4 guesses and I got it right. So it's a little guessing game. So we'll go over that one. Do I want to play it again? No. All right. Then we'll do another one. And this one will work with arrays, which again, you might have a hard time understanding. Again, you can see it's pretty simple. And it's going to ask me to enter 5 numbers. So I'm just going to make up 5 numbers. Let's say we've got a student who took 5 tests and they got a 77, then they got an 88, then they got 100, then they got a 93, and then they got an 80. All right. So it says the largest number was 100, the smallest number was 77, the sum of all 5 test grades was 438. The range, which is the highest minus the lowest, 100 minus 77 is 23, and their average was an 87.6. All right. And then finally, we will look at the homework problem. All right, because a couple people had emailed me and said they were really having problems with the homework problem. So we'll look at that one. And if you say, what is that? I'll show it to you right now. All right, so it's right here. It's going to look like this. I've given you some of the stuff already. It's got a nice interface. Fast food drive-through. So hamburgers are $1 each. Let's say you bought 3 hamburgers. So that should be $3 right now. Fries are $2 each. So let's say you bought 2 fries. So 3 at $1 is $3. 2 at $2 is $4. So 3 plus 4 is 7. And let's say you bought 1 soda. So that's $3 and $4 and $2.50. So if my logic is correct, that should be $9.50. And it says that was your total cost. So it's a fairly simplistic type of program. At least hopefully most people will find that it is. All right. So with all that said, all right, I'm going to jump back in and I'm going to bring up this BMI thing. Again, I'm not going to go over this interface because it's only a button. The only thing I would say about it, it's relying on this, and I really should have the word defer there, but I don't. All right. It's relying on this file that's called under the JS folder that's called bmi.js. And as far as my interface, I've got a button of type submit. The ID is btn submit. The name is btn submit. The value on the button will be calculate. And when I click the button, I want to run something underneath my JavaScript program that's called main. That's it. All right. So let's take a look at what's under this BMI.js. We're going to start by, and we're going to write the code, but I want to start by going over, this is what I gave you. All right. And again, like I said, we're going to write this together. It's a bit of code. All right. A person's body mass index, or their BMI, is basically derived from the formula that you see right there. Some scientist made this up. And what it says is, given a person's height, look at their weight. And if their weight falls within a certain range, they're considered to be underweight. If their weight falls within a different range, they're considered to be of optimal weight, or the right weight for their height. If it falls within another range, they're considered overweight for their height. Finally, if it falls within an extreme range where you weigh a lot, you're not that tall for your weight, you're considered obese. And that's what they're saying in here. All right, I'm not going to read that to you. And as it says, there is some debate about, people have been saying for years this scale should be changed or whatever, and it may be sometime. We don't really care for what we're doing. All right, so you're going to put in a height, you're going to put in a weight, then you're going to run this formula. And based on that formula, you're going to come up with a BMI, or a body mass index. All right. If that body mass index is less than 18.5, you're considered underweight. So that's the message that'll come up, is you're underweight. If your body mass index is greater than or equal to 18.5, but less than 25, you're considered optimal, or the right weight for your height. All right. If your BMI is greater than or equal to 25, but less than 30, you're considered overweight for your height. And finally, if your BMI is greater than or equal to 30, you're considered obese for your height. So what we're going to do in here is we're going to start by coming in, and as it says here, we're going to create a bunch of constants. In fact, I already created them for you. We've got one that'll be called min weight, and it'll be equal to 1 that's called max weight, and it'll be equal to 777. It's just a number I made up. One called min height, which is going to be equal to 12, and one called max height, which is going to be equal to 96. So in other words, a person's weight must be between 1 and 777 pounds, and their height must be between 12 inches, which is 1 foot, and 96 inches, which is 8 feet. Now, when I originally did this particular program, I broke it up into a bunch of different routines. All right, what are called functions. And I've given this kind of an analogy before. It may help, it may not. I'm hoping that it helps. Let's imagine that I decide I'm going to sell widgets. I don't care what a widget is. It's just some kind of a thing. So I decide I'm going to create them and sell them right out of my house. All right. So I'm in my garage, and I got a big garage, let's say, and I come in there and I make widgets. Now I've got 100 of them. And I'm thinking, well, I might sell a couple of them over time. So I make a website and I put it out there, and I'm thinking, you know what, maybe I'll sell these, maybe it'll make some money, maybe it won't, we'll see. So my website goes live, and in the first day, I get orders for 10,000 widgets, even though I only have 100. Well, I can't make 10,000 widgets. I can't make them in my garage because it's not big enough. So I rent out a warehouse. Well, now that I've rented out a warehouse, I've got to have somebody to clean it. So I need some kind of cleaning staff. I need some security, etc. And I need some other people to work with me. All right. Well, why am I telling you this? Because imagine each one of those people has a different job, or in other words, they have a different function. That's kind of what we're talking about here. If you take a program and you break it up into parts, You're breaking it up into multiple functions. For this first example, I decided to put everything into the same function. And one of the reasons I did that is for you to see how tough it can be when you put everything together like that. It's not the way you should do things, but we'll do it like that for the first one. So it says all of our variables should be declared in main. So we'll do that. We'll have a height variable, a weight variable, we'll have a BMI variable, we'll have a BMI status variable, and that will either be overweight, underweight, optimal weight, or obese, etc. All right. Then when we're done running the program and we've told the person their BMI, we'll ask them if they want to run the program again. And we'll allow you to do it over and over and over and over and over again until you don't want to anymore. All right. When you put in the code for the height, it's got to be a number. And it also has to be a number that falls within the range that we want it to be. In other words, it should be a number between, for the height, 1 and 12 and 96. When they put in a number for the weight, it should be a number between 1 and 777. If you put in something that's out of range or non-numeric or blank, we're not going to accept it. We'll just ask you to do it again. All right. Then again, we'll use that formula that I've already shown you to figure out the person's BMI. And we'll print it out. We'll print it out to 2 decimal places. And we'll do that because if your BMI is 23.8457316, I mean, that's kind of silly. So we'll just do it to 2 decimal places. All right. And then based on that, and based on those numbers I showed you earlier, we'll say that the person is either underweight, optimal weight, overweight, or obese. Plus, we'll keep track as we do this of how many underweight people we had, how many optimal weight people we had, how many overweight people we had, and how many obese people we had. At the end of the program, when we say we don't want to do this anymore, we'll print out these numbers. Okay. And as it says, I've already created the simple HTML file and I gave it to you. All right. It calls that we have on screen right now called bmi.js. So all of our code is going to go into this file. So what you see up here, and again, it's not mandatory that you make these uppercase like I did, but these are all called constants. Their value will not change as the program runs. So the minimum acceptable height is 12 inches. The maximum acceptable height is 96 inches. The minimum acceptable weight is 1 pound. The maximum acceptable weight is 777 pounds. Now, these other things that are in here, later we're going to do some checks. And having these values in there of 18 and of 25 and of 30 will help us when we do those checks later. All right, just so you're aware of that. Okay, so what will happen when we write this? I've already got the code in here, so I'm going to go back to the one I was showing you. But what will happen when we do this, all right, is we will have just one routine that's called main. So let me pretend I'm one of you. And what I mean by that is, this is what I sent you this morning, JavaScript pretest 1. I've got it here. I'm just going to remove it. I'll put it in here. Throw it in there for right now. All right, I'm going to unzip this. Oh, looks like I've got it open, so I'll close it. All right. So I'm going to unzip this. This is the same file that I sent you this morning. So I'll extract it right here, put it over there for whatever reason, but there it is. I'm going to open this up with code right now. All right. And the one that I'm working with here is the bmi.html, and under JS, it'll be the bmi.js file. All right. So what's in here right now is just this. You can see it's empty other than that. So I've got this minimum height, minimum weight, maximum weight. All right. And then this max under, min over, and min obese. Again, don't worry about those for right now. But I want to start writing the program. And again, I purposely set this one up as everything is inside of a function that's called main. All right. Everything that we do is going to be in here. Everything. Now, you do not typically write a program of any size like that. And the reason you don't is the example I gave you earlier. You typically want to, typically the way I would write this is I would write a routine that would read in the height. Then I would write another routine that would read in the weight. Then I would write another routine that would figure out the BMI. Then I would write another routine that would figure out if the person was underweight, overweight, optimal weight, or obese. Then I would write another routine where I'd print all that stuff out. So I typically write at least 5 routines in here, 5 different functions. And main would be what's called a driver. And a driver is like a really good supervisor that they don't necessarily do all the work, but they know, how to put the right people on the right job. Well, in the same way, main would be calling these routines to do their work. That's how main should be written. All right. So you might say, that's fine. Then why are you showing it to us like this? Because there's a lot of people who don't write code that way. So this should be the program driver. That's the way it should be. Now, we're not going to write it like that. We're going to do everything in here. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to put a ton in here, I'm going to put in a ton of comments. All right. So I'm going to both declare and initialize program variables. All right. Well, what does that mean? Remember, a variable is something that can change while the program is running. It can vary. So I'm going to create about, I don't know, 7 or 8, or maybe even more, maybe up to 10 of these. The first one I'm going to create is called height. All right. Now, if I say let height like this, I can do that. Height is now a variable. And its value there's nothing in there. I haven't given it a value yet. All right. So its value, according to JavaScript, its value is referred to as being undefined. Well, let's give it a value. I'm just going to give it a default value of 0. So now we know that it's supposed to hold a number at least. And then I'm going to make another variable called weight. And I'm going to default that to 0 as well. And you'll notice in here with both of these, they're going to be whole numbers. Typically, if you ask someone how much they weigh, they don't say 172 and a half. All right. So we're just going to use whole numbers there. All right. We're eventually going to figure out the person's BMI. Now that one will have a decimal place in it. All right. We're also going to figure out the person's BMI status. And that's going to be a string. It's going to be either, so let's put some stuff here. So I'm going to put comments here. Height must be between 12 and 96. So this is weight must be between 1 and 777. Those are just, again, arbitrary things I came up with. This will be the calculated body mass index. All right. This will be either, I shouldn't even say either, this will be underweight, optimal weight, overweight, and I'm going to make this, it's going to go run off the page, but that's okay, or obese. All right, and we can still come in here and view and word wrap. All right. I don't know if that was easier to read or harder to read like that. So far I've got 4 variables. All right. I'm going to make a couple more, but those are kind of our core variables for the program. Okay. Now, if you look up here, what do we have? These are all the things we're going to be checking. We're going to make sure that their height is between those 2 values, that their weight is between those 2 values, etc. All right. So we now have a height and a weight and a BMI and a BMI status. Well, what else do we need? Well, one thing that we need is we're supposed to figure out how many total of each type of person there are. In other words, I'm going to say let, and I'll just call it total underweight. So that's how many underweight people there are. And I'll set it equal to 0. So that'll be the total number of underweight people. All right, I'll have another one. And I'm going to set that equal to 0. And as you can see, that is the total number of optimal weight people. All right. Then I'll have another one that I'll again set equal to 0. And as you'd guess, that's my total number of overweight people. And finally, I'll have a total obese. And that is our total number of obese people. So those things right there, those 4 things that you see right here, these are referred to as accumulators. All right, because they will accumulate as the program goes on. If I put in somebody is 12 inches and weighs 50 pounds, they're going to probably end up being obese. So my total obese will be incremented by 1, that kind of an idea. So again, these are our accumulators. All right, I'm going to have a few other variables that I'm going to add in here as well. I'm going to save this too when I get done. All right, I'm going to save this. Okay, so I'm going to have another one in here that I'm just going to call str1. It's going to be, and I'm going to set it equal to it's going to be a program output string number 1. I'm going to have 2 of these. Another string str2, again equal to nothing, and it'll be my program output string number 2. And if you don't know what those are, don't worry about it because you're going to see them in action in just a few minutes. All right. So I'm going to have a few other things. Remember, we want to ask the person if they want to keep going and run the program again. So I'm going to create another variable called keep going, and I'm going to set that equal to true. And that will literally be our program continue variable. All right, that will allow us to continue with the program. All right, so we've got that. I'll have another one that I'm going to call again, and I'm going to set that equal to nothing. All right, and again, you might say, well, what the heck does that mean? That will be program again. All right, finally, we'll have another one that's going to be called first char, and again, it'll be set equal to nothing, and that'll be the first character of again. Now, you might look at this and say, I have no idea what any of this stuff is. But remember what we're trying to do here. We're trying to read in a person's height and read in a person's weight. If they don't fall within these extremes, we give them an error message and tell them to do it again. If they do put in a height within this range and a weight within this range, we run this formula and we figure out their body mass index. And we let them know that for their height, that they're either underweight, optimal weight, overweight, or obese for their height. And we keep track of how many underweights, how many optimal weights, how many overweights, and how many obese we have. We let the person run the program again and again and again and again until she or he says, I don't want to run it anymore. Once that happens, we print out the total number of underweight people, the total number of optimal weight people, the total number of overweight people, and the total number of obese people. And that's all we're saying here. Now, if you notice, these variables that are in here, all of them are gray. And if I put my mouse over it, then the system is telling me, you declared these variables, but you're not using them because we haven't written any code yet to use them. We're going to start that right now. Now, you might look and go, man, you're just writing a whole heck of a lot. The good news is we're about half done with the program already. Yeah, that means we've got about 100 lines we have to type in here. So I'm going to do that next. I want the user to be able to run the program again and again and again. Let's assume they want to run it 15 times. All right. Well, we've got this variable here that's called keep going, and that's our program continue variable. It's a Boolean variable, which means it's either true or false. So while this variable is true, so we can either say while keep going, which is what I'm going to say, but we could have also said while keep going equal true. Well, it's set to true already. So we're going to go in and do whatever is in here. That's good. That's what we want to do. And notice that variable called keep going is no longer gray. It's now darkened, blackened, whatever you want to call it, because it's now being used. All right. So what we want to do then is we want to ask the user, we want to ask him or her to enter a height, and then we'll check it to make sure it's within range. Then we'll ask the user to enter a weight, and we'll check it to make sure it's within range. Once they put in a height that's between 12 and 96, and they put in a weight that's between 1 and 777, we will then figure out their BMI, their body mass index. After we figure it out, we'll print it out on the screen so they can see it. And we'll say, do you want to do the program again? If they do, we'll run it again as many times as they want. Eventually, if they don't want to do it again, we will print out the total number of underweight people that were inputted, the total number of optimal weight people that were inputted, the total number of overweight people that were inputted, and the total number of obese people that were inputted. That's the idea behind the whole program. So we're going to get going right now. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say this string right here, we've already set it equal to the empty string. All right, but I'm going to reset it. In other words, I'm going to make sure that when we start the program, that is empty. Okay, right there. I don't use the word let again. You only use let when you're creating a variable one time. After you've created the variable, you don't use let anymore. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say height equal, all right, parse int, prompt, enter a height from 12 to 96. And we'll give it a default value. So I'll give it a value of 72. We could put anything in there or leave it blank. So what should happen when we run this program is it should come up and ask us for a height. All right, that's the good news. But the bad news is it's possible that we'll put in a height that's either less than 12 or greater than 96, or it's empty, or it's got something non-numeric in it. So we have to check for that. All right. Remember, if we put something in that's not numeric for our height, we get a value called NaN, capital N, lowercase a, capital N. That means not a number. All right. So while is NaN height. So while you put in something that's non-numeric, or the height we put in is less than the minimum height, which was 12 inches, or the height we put in was greater than the maximum height we're allowing, which is 96 inches. So these are our three error conditions. I'll put it on 3 different lines so you can see what I'm doing here. So this is what we're doing right here, is what's known as validation. We're validating and we're making sure if we put something non-numeric or out of range, we're not going to allow it. All right. So what do I mean? If we put something in here that's, quote, bad, unquote, we're going to ask them to do it again. And we'll put a message in here that said, bad input. Enter height 12 to 96. So it's a little different message, all right, that you'll see in there. So the idea is we're asking them to put in a number. While they put in a number that's bad, we're going to keep them stuck in here. They'll be stuck right in there until they put in a value that's not bad. So once we get out of here, once we get down to here, they have put in a number, once we get down to here, they have put in a number that's between 12 and 96. That's exactly what we asked them to do. Now, just because I don't want you to have to watch me type, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it right here. Why? Because the next thing we want to do is we want to ask them to enter a weight. So we're going to ask them to enter a weight that's between 1 and 777 pounds. And again, we'll just put in a default value here. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. But again, very similar to what we did before. While we put in a weight that's not a number, or a weight that's less than our minimum weight of 1 pound, or we put in a weight that's greater than 777, we'll again ask them to do it again. Bad input, enter weight 1 to 777. All right. Now, you might be totally confused right now, and if you are, believe me, it is actually okay. But what I want to show you is this. All right, I'm going to save everything. I'm going to go back now to my button here that's on my screen. I'm going to run this program. It's not done yet, but I just want to show you. All right. All right. It says cannot get pretest. Well, I don't know what's wrong with that. So let's see. JS BMI, it's right there. Call main. All right, it's because I renamed it. It's got to be 01 BMI.js. Like, it's got to be the same name as that name. So let me save it and run it again. This cannot get /JavaScript pretest. Well, I'm going to keep going, but I don't understand why it's not running because there's absolutely nothing wrong with this. All right. What should have happened is it should have come up and it should have said enter a height from 12 to 96. After we put in a valid height, it should have then come up and said enter a weight from 1 to 777. Not sure why it's not. I'll look during the break and we'll get it working. All right. Before we leave today, this whole program is going to be working. All right. Okay. So once we get to this point, what we're assuming here, all right, once we get out of this, we're weight, now we're able to figure out what the person's BMI is. So I'm going to say here, calculate BMI. Again, BMI is body mass index. So I'm going to say BMI equal, it's the same formula I gave you up above. So weight divided by height, height times height. And there's other ways of writing this, just so you know. All right, so height times height times 703. And again, that's some scientist came up with that. I didn't. And we want it to 2 decimal places. So I'm using to 2. That'll calculate the BMI. All right, good. All right, so what's left? Well, now we have to let the person, we have to figure out, were they underweight? Were they overweight? Were they optimal weight? Or are they obese? All right. And we're calling that thing BMI status. That's your status. All right. So we will print out what their BMI is in just a little bit. But we're going to figure out their status. So if their BMI is less than max under, what the heck is max under? That's one of those 2 constants I showed you up above. So if their BMI is less than 18, all right, that means it's less than 18. So in other words, BMI is less than 18.5. Well, what does that mean? That means they're underweight. All right, so their BMI status is going to be equal to underweight. All right, and we now have an underweight person. So we want to add 1 to our total counter of underweight people. Remember, there's 4 ways we can do this. We can say total underweight equals total underweight plus 1. That's the hardest way. Or we can say total underweight plus equal 1. Or we can say just plus either at the end or at the beginning. I'll just do it right here. So if their BMI was less than 18.5, we're letting them know their status will be underweight, and we're adding 1 to our total number of underweight people. All right. Else, if the BMI is less than min over, all right, what that means is if we get to this point, BMI is between 18.5 and less than 25. That's all we're saying. And if that's the case, they're of optimal weight. So in other words, they're the right weight for their height. So I'm going to put here optimal weight, and I'm going to add 1 to my total optimal weight. What people tend to do here is to overcomplicate, and they make this stuff, in my opinion, for whatever my opinion is worth, all right, they make these things harder than they are. Just imagine somebody came up to you, they were taking a survey, and you were very open to this, and they said, how tall are you? And you said, I'm 5 feet 8 inches tall, so I'm 68 inches tall. And they said, how much do you weigh? And you said, I weigh 115 pounds. And they plugged a couple of things into the computer, and they said, BMI is 23.86. You're of optimal weight, so you're a good weight for your height. All right, that's just what we're doing here. All right, so now we're going to put another else in here. We're going to say else if the BMI is less than min obese. And remember what that means. First of all, remember I said, if this is true, we skip all the rest. If this is false, but this is true, we skip this and we skip all the rest. So if the person did have a BMI of under 18.5, we just do this. If their BMI was between 18.5 but less than 25, we do this. Now we're going to say if their BMI is between 25 and less than 30, all right, now they're an overweight person. So we're going to put in here overweight, and we're going to add 1 to our total overweight. Finally, we've only got 4 classifications. If they're not underweight, and they're not if they're not underweight, and they're not optimal weight, and they're not overweight, they have to be obese. So else their status is obese, and we want to add 1 to our total number of people who are obese, just like that. All right. Now, I'm going to finish this, so we'll take a break, but it'll be probably a little bit after 9 o'clock. All right. So now we know the person's BMI and we know their status. That's good. That's what we want to know. So we're going to print all that stuff out. All right. So I'm going to say in here, that string that we did before, the str1, I'm going to add to it, and I'm going to say height plus their height plus, again, this is like hitting the enter key right there. All right, then I'm going to do the same thing. So that now their height, and now we'll have in there their weight. All right, and now we're going to put in there their BMI. And finally, we want to put in there their status, the word underweight, the word overweight, the word obese, or the words optimal weight. All right. That was called BMI status. All right. So BMI status. Now that we've got all that information, we're going to alert it or put it out on the screen. So that should say something along the lines of height 75, weight 175, BMI 24.83, status optimal weight. That's what we have to do. All right. And so we've done all that stuff. We're still in this big honking while loop right here. But now we've got to ask the user, you want to do it again? That's exactly what we're going to ask them. So ask user, run program again or not. All right. So I'm going to prompt the user. No parse int or parse float. I'm just going to say, run the program again. And I'm expecting them to be able to put in a yes or a no. The problem is people are human and a lot of them don't read directions. That's just how things work. So I'll assume they want to run it again. So I'll default it to yes. All right, that's fine. Now the problem is, what if they put in the word yes? That's not a Y or an N. So what I'm going to do after they do that is I'm going to take what they put in there equal, again, dot char at 0 dot to uppercase. And we did go over this last week, but it's like, if you look at what the hell is that? Imagine they put in there, yes. So we're asking you to grab the first character, which is that Y, and then make it uppercase. So we're throwing away anything they typed in after that. So just like that. Why did we do that? Because if the first character input was a Y, run program again. All right, so if, again, equal, Y, keep going. In other words, I want to do it again, equal true. Else, keep going, equal false. We don't want to do it anymore. All right, and finally now, we're assuming eventually they say, no, I don't want to run it again. Okay, so we're going to print out all of that stuff at the end. Remember, we had this str1 in here. All right, so in here, what we were doing, print out person's height, weight, BMI, and BMI status. That's what we're doing right there. All right. And now we want to print out our totals. So print out total, number, underweight, total, number, optimal weight, total, number, overweight, and finally, total, number, obese people. That's the last thing we have to do in here. All right, so I'm going to use that str2, and I'm going to put in here total, number, underweights, and we'll print that out. So plus total underweight, and then we'll add to that. Again, it's like we hit the enter key there. All right. Put a plus equal in front of all these. So now total number optimal weights. All right. Then we'll have our total number overweights. And our total number of and then we'll print that out. All right. Now, for some reason, it's giving me something funky when I'm trying to do this, and I don't know why. So I'm going to look for that during the break. But that's everything. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to take a break until 9:15. We're going to come back, and I'm going to spend about 5 minutes going over this program with you. So I'll see you at 9:15. All right, it is 9:15, so I'll continue on. For some reason, I had this in a folder that was called JS Pretest 1, and inside of that folder was another folder called JS Pretest 1, and the system didn't like that for whatever reason. So I just removed the inner folder, and everything looks like it's working okay now. Now, I do want to mention too to you, if you notice in here, I have an extension for Visual Studio that's been loaded onto my machine. It's done a lot of this formatting for me. If you want it, if you don't, not a problem. But if you do, just go down over here in your guttural area here, go down to the bottom. All right. In fact, go to the fourth one. 1, 2, 3, 4. Go to extensions and just type in, I think it's prettier. All right. And you can install it then if you want it. Okay. And there's a lot, you'll notice it doesn't say install because I've already got it installed. All right. And it'll do a bunch of formatting and stuff for you. And there's other things you can do with it. I don't want to go off on that tangent. I just wanted to mention it to you. So again, when we look over here, all right, you saw what our requirements were. So we came in and we created 7 constants to begin with. A minimum height for the person, a maximum height for the person, a minimum weight and a maximum weight for the person. All right. We also did 3 other ones that we used with our if statements. Okay. And you might say, why didn't you just say if BMI less than 18, for example? And it would have worked just fine. I could have done that. But over time, these guidelines might change and they might not be 18 anymore. They might say that for underweight, it's 20, let's say. Then all I have to do is change this in one place, and I know it'll be changed everywhere else. That's why I did it that way. All right. So we came in and main was our driver, but main did everything. So we started out by declaring a bunch of variables. The height we were going to input, the weight we were going to input, the BMI we were going to calculate, and the BMI status, which we're also calculating. Then in here, we also had our accumulators, totalers, whatever you want to call them. All right. Our total number of underweight, our total number of optimal weight, our total number of overweight, and our total number of obese. Now, normally I would go and line this stuff up so it looked like nice, pretty little soldiers here, and I do this. And it make it much easier for you to read. The problem is with prettier on there, as soon as I save, it knocks it back to the way it was. And I'm just going to leave prettier on there. All right, then we had some other, just call it here, other variables. All right, first we had output string number 1. And that, what is that for? It holds a person's info. So for any individual person, it holds his or her height, weight, BMI, and BMI status. This holds accumulators. All right. The keep going is literally that. It's our program continue variable. Do you want to keep going? Again is we ask the person, do you want to run the program again? All right. And we never even used first char. It's still gray, so I don't even need that. Okay, so those are our variables. And now this is the same thing as saying this. So we have the person. So we input the height. All right. Then we validate. Height is numeric between 12 and 96. If it's not, we make them do it again. Then we come in and we input the weight. And we validate that the weight is numeric and it's between 1 and 777. So once we get down to here, we have put in a valid height and we have put in a valid weight. So now we can calculate their BMI. After we calculate their BMI, now we can calculate their BMI status. Again, underweight, optimal weight. I'll just put here, etc. All right. So if their BMI was under 18.5, they're underweight. So we add 1 to our accumulator. Take the status, and we also increment, which means add to. So we increment the associated accumulator. So if they're under 18.5, we set their status to underweight and we add 1 to our total number of underweights. If they're between 18.5 but less than 25, we set their status to optimal weight accumulators. If their BMI is between 25 but less than 30, we set their status to overweight. We add 1 to our overweight counter. And if they're not underweight, optimal weight, or overweight, they have to be obese. So we set their status to obese and we add 1 to the obese counter. Now that we've got both their BMI and their status, now we print out that information. So we set it up here and we print it out here. Then we ask the user, do you want to run the program again? Now notice I said again equal, and that's going to hold y, n, yes, whatever. And then I reset again. Remember, originally I had that variable up here that was called first char. And I said it was the first character of again. Well, what I can do if I want to is instead of saying again equals this, I can say first char. So now it's equal to the first character, which means I got to use first char here too. All right. So I'm asking you your height. I'm going to keep asking you until you put in a number between 12 and 96. Then I ask you your weight. I'm going to keep asking it to you until you put in a weight between 1 and 777 pounds. Then I figure out your BMI, your body mass index, to 2 decimal places. Then I figure out your BMI status of underweight, optimal weight, overweight, or obese. Then I print that out. Then I ask if you want to run the program again. I'm assuming sooner or later you're going to say, no, I don't. Then I'm going to print out all of your final totals right here. That's the whole program right there. All right, so let's save it and try running it. So it is saying in here, enter a height. Let's put in all of our bad stuff. So I'm going to leave it blank, so there's nothing in there. And we get bad input, enter height 12 to 96. Let's put in something that's less than 12. I'll put in 11. Bad input, enter height 12 to 96. Let's put in 97. Bad input, enter height 12 to 96. So I'll put in 72. All right, now let's do the same thing with weight. Let's leave it blank. Bad input, enter weight 1 to 777. Let's put in something less than 1. add input. All right, so let's put in 778, add input. So let's put in here 111. All right, so it says that that person was 72 inches tall, weighed 111 pounds. Their BMI was 15.05, meaning they are underweight for their height. We click OK, and it says, do you want to run it again? Yes, we do. Now let's just put in valid stuff. So let's say and 166 pounds. Now 72, 166, their BMI is in the optimal range. So we print that out and we say optimal weight. Then we run it again. Yes, we do want to run it again. And we'll say 72. And we'll say the person weighs 200 pounds. Now their BMI is 27.12, so they're overweight for their height. Finally, let's run it one more time. So yes, we do. And we're going to say that again, they're 72 inches and they weigh 333 pounds. And now it says they're obese. Now we have one of each right now. We have one underweight, one optimal weight, one overweight, and one obese. So do you want to run it again? No. And it shows us that we have one of each. All right. So that's the first. All right. So I'm going to come in and write the second one. Again, when I'm doing this, if you have questions, you can ask. And if you don't want to ask now, if you feel funny about asking or whatever, all right, then just email me and say, hey, this didn't make sense to me. All right. So I'm going to close the BMI stuff. And I'm going to open the guessing game here and here. Now, the guessing game, the interface, literally, the interface for this looks just like it did for the last one. The only thing that's different is I'm calling a different JavaScript file. I have a different thing here, and that should have said pretest, not test. So pretest 01 guessing game, which tells me probably that is wrong too. Yep. Okay. So there's our guessing game. It's not going to look any different. The rest of this, so this up to right here and this up to right here basically look the same for all three of these programs. All right, so let's go to our JavaScript for the guessing game. And let's look at this. This literally is a guessing game program. So what will happen is the program will generate a number between 1 and 100. And you are to guess this in ideally as few guesses as possible. If you put in no guess whatsoever, or you put in a guess that is non-numeric, or you put in a guess that's less than 1, or you put in a guess that's greater than 100, we don't accept your guess. We just ask you to do it again. All right, so we're assuming that what you're going to put in here is going to be a valid guess. All right, we're going to again use main for everything. We'll again add some constants up at the top. We'll put in the code that'll generate the random number. And if you say, geez, I don't know how to do that, I literally went out to W3 schools and I typed in, basically generate a random number between 1 and 100 and use their code. All right. So we'll put in the code that lets you make a guess. We'll let you know once you put in a number that's between 1 and 100, was your guess too high? Was your guess too low? Or was your guess correct? So again, if we put in something non-numeric or out of range, meaning it's less than 1 or it's greater than 100, we display all guesses must be numbers between 1 and 100. Please try again. and they didn't make a valid guess, so we do not increment their total number of guesses. If the guess is too high or too low, it should say either, as example, we put 67 here. Let's say that the number was 60. So it should say the guess of 67 is too low. Let's say that low. And in both cases, we'll say, please try again. Okay. But they made a guess. So we do want to increment their guesses. Finally, we'll assume that eventually they'll guess it correctly. So we'll say the guess of 67 in, and we'll let them know how many guesses they had was correct. All right. The program should continue to ask for guesses until the user guesses the right number. Okay. So here were our constants. This is all we have in here. So our minimum allowable guess is 1. Our maximum allowable guess is 100. And here I'm just building stuff that we're going to put into messages. So all guesses must be between 1 and 100. Please try again. I want to be able to say the guess of 67 is too high, the guess of 67 is too low, or the guess of 67 was correct. It took you, and we'll let you know how many guesses. All right, this is a little less code to type in here than we had in the last program. All right, but again, I'm going to start with a main in here. And I have been asked before, not by the people in this class, but by people in other classes, what's the significance of the word main? In JavaScript, there is no significance. I could have called this Ralph. It wouldn't matter. But the class that most of you, if this is your first class right now, then in spring, you will be taking AWD1000, which is C# programming. And in C#, every C# program starts by calling a function called main. So I just wanted you to get used to using the word main. All right. So again, the idea is main is usually the program driver. Not in this case, because it's going to hold everything. We're not writing other routines. We will write other routines in the next program. All right. So let's come in and put in, I don't know, about 7 or 8 variables. So I'm going to both initialize, how about this? Declare and initialize the program variables. And I want to explain to you when I do this, the difference between declaring a variable and initializing a variable. This will be the random number that we have. If I do this, I just declared a variable called random number. It has no value. Its value is undefined. If I do this and add to it equals 0, and I'll say here, the random number between 1 and 100. Now I have both declared the variable and I have initialized the variable. So I gave it an initial value. All right. Now I'm going to make another one here. I'm going to call it, you guessed it. All right. And I'm going to set it equal to false. And that'll be the user guess. And I'm going to assume you guessed it wrong. And the reason I'm assuming that is you're guessing one number out of 100. So the first time you guess it, you have a 1% chance of getting it between 1 and 100. Now think about this. I'm going to break away from this for a minute. All right. Let's just take a couple of examples here. All right. So let's assume for a second, make this nice and big. We're going to run it. We're going to assume that the number generated was 8. And I'm going to guess 50. and that's too high. And then I'm going to guess 25. And again, it's going to say too high. Then I'm going to guess 12. And again, it's going to say too high. Now think about what just happened. I've eliminated 89 of the 100 numbers. I know now that the number has to be between 1 and 11. It has to be. And I try to keep cutting in half with my guess. So now I'm going to guess 6. And it's going to say too low. So now I know the number must be either 7, 8, 9, 10, or 11. So with 4 guesses, I've eliminated 95 out of the 100 possibilities. So I'm going to say 9. And it'll say too high. Well, it's not 6, so it's got to be 7 or 8. It has to be. So if I say 7, and it comes back and it says too low, well, now the only thing left is 8, and that'll be correct. So I've guessed it in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guesses. All right, let's go the other way. And let's say the number is 86. All right, now I say 50 and it says too low. And then I say 75 and it says too low. And now I say 87 and it says too high. Now I know that the number, okay, it's got to be between 76 and 86. I've eliminated all those other possibilities. So it has to be in that range. So I keep cutting it in half. So half is about 81, and it'll say too low. So now I know the number has got to be between 82 and 86. So I'll say 84. And again, it'll say too low. So now I know it's got to be either 85 or 86. And let's say now I say 6, and it'll say correct. So now I've guessed it in 6 guesses. That's what we're programming into with this game. And that's it. You've got to remember something when you start working with this. And that is literally, if you read enough online, etc., what you will hear is the computer has the intellect of an 18-month-old child. All right. It understands sometimes hundreds of words, sometimes more, sometimes less. All right. And if you treat it like that, you're probably better off. Okay. So we're going to make another variable like we did before called again, and we'll set that equal to true. This time we'll call that'll be our variable. In fact, last time we called it keep going. So let's do the same thing here. And we'll set that to true. So that'll be our program continue variable. All right. We'll have status. We'll call it the status. And we'll set that equal to nothing. And that will either be too high, too high, too low, or correct. It's your status. I'm going to call it guess status. Doesn't really matter. But I'm going to have a variable that's going to be called the guess. And I'm going to set that equal to 0. And that'll be your current guess. All right. I'll have another variable that's called num guesses. And I'll set that equal to 0. And that'll be the number of guesses made. All right. And let's see, just like we did before. All right. We've got this thing. Let's just call it, we'll do like we did before. So I'll let again equal nothing. And that'll be the same thing as before. Run program again or not. And we'll let our first character, just like we did before, be equal to nothing. And that'll be, again, the first character of, again, finally, I'm going to have one last thing. I'm going to just call it input str. It'll be an input string. We'll get to what that means in just a bit. But these are our variables. All right. You're going to notice the way that this program is set up. It's going to be very, very, very similar to the last program. We're going to have a while loop, which says while keep going. All right. And then we're going to have another thing inside of it where we will check the guess, another while loop, to make sure that the guess we put in was within range. So let's start. So I'm going to say while, keep going. And you heard this already, but that is a shortcut for saying while, keep going, equal, 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 true. It's the same thing. So while that's the case, what do I want to do? Well, the first thing I want to do is to generate a new random number between 1 and 100. All right, we call that random number, and I'm going to say it equals this. Now, do you have to worry about what this means? I'll explain it to you, but it might make little to no sense. Virtually every computer programming language has a way of generating random numbers. And it does that because with most programming languages, if you wanted to, you could write games with them. All right. And a lot of work with games works with random numbers. But what most people don't realize until somebody tells them or until they read it or whatever is typically what happens is when the computer generates a random number, it generates a number that's greater than or equal to 0 and is less than 1. Now, let's assume for a second that we just generated a random number, and it was 0.876543221. We're taking that number and we're multiplying it by 100. All right? And we're saying math.floor. Oops, sorry. We're saying their math.floor. So if we multiply this by 100, all right? If we do that, it's going to come up and look like this. It'll be 876.54321. The floor says we don't care about the decimal, so get rid of that. So now we've got 876. Then we add 1 to it, meaning that the number here would be 877. So why do we add 1? Because remember, it could generate the number 0. 0 is not valid in our case. So if it would generate a 0, then our random number would be 1. Now we're only going to accept from in here, this would be an unacceptable number. All right. But since we're multiplying it by 100, we had in here 87, we had in here point 0.8776543321. When I multiply it by 100, it's going to be this 87.654321. We will throw that away and we will add 1 to this, meaning 88 would be our random number. All right. Now, if you say, well, you kind of screwed up that explanation, I really don't get random numbers, you don't have to for what we're doing. All right, it's okay. Now, we just generated a random number. So what do I want to do? Well, first I'm going to say num guesses, you haven't guessed yet, equals 0. So in other words, I'm going to set my number of guesses to 0 because I haven't made any yet. Guessed it, I'm sorry, you said you guessed it. We're going to set that equal to false. Why? You haven't guessed it yet. All right. And then finally, this, which is going to be too high, too low, etc. We're going to set that equal to nothing. Why? Because you haven't guessed anything yet. All right. So we've asked you to do all that stuff. Okay. All right. So while the guess, so while you guessed it, is equal to false, and that's it. That's a long way of writing it. So the way I'm going to write that, instead of saying all that, is I'm going to say while not, you guessed it. All right. So again, what I have here on these two lines, here and here, are the same thing, but it's less typing to do it this way. So we're assuming you didn't guess it. You didn't yet because you haven't made a guess. So what am I going to do? To make a guess. We're going to ask them to make a guess, and we'll ask them to guess a number that's between 1 and 100. All right. So we're going to say, what do we call that? The guess. Notice how all these aren't gray anymore because we're using them. This is still gray. So right now, the guess is still gray. But as soon as I come in here and do this, the guess equal, notice now it's not gray anymore. All right. So the guess equal, and we're going to come in and do a parse int with a prompt. Between 1 and 100. Okay, just like that. So between 1 and 100. All right, and we'll even give them a default value of 50. We don't have to do that, but we can. All right, so that's what we're asking them, is to make a guess. Now, what's the problem? We have to validate the guess. We have to validate the guess is first numeric and second between 1 and 1. One of those, we're going to ask them to do it again. All right. I want to say that again. If we ask them, okay, so we're coming in here and we're asking them to make a guess. All right. So if this guess that's in here, if this guess is not a number, or the guess is less than our min, which was 1, or our guess was greater, so that was more than 100. Okay? So if that's the case, what do we know? They didn't put in a valid guess. All right? They did not put in a valid guess. So what are we going to do? Well, we could ask them right away to just do it again, or I can just come in here and say this. I can say, you guessed it, is still false. Else they put in a valid guess. So otherwise, you guessed it is equal to true. Now, that's the kind of logic, and I'm being serious here. It's not hard. It really and truly is not hard. All right. Now, can we be a little bit more specific? Well, Remember, we've got some messages in here. Says all guesses must be between 1 and 100. Please try again. So what we could do is down here, we could give them an alert. All right, or actually just say the status is equal to BAD plus PTA. So all that is saying is, again, you guess something non-numeric or out of range, please try it again. All right. So we'll say that. And then we can say you guessed it as false. Well, we might as well print that for them. So we can say alert the status. All right. Otherwise, we're going to come down here and we're going to do a bunch of work because they have put in something valid. All right. So if we come in here and it says guess a number between 1 and 100, and they come in there and they just type in hello, it'll not be numeric. So we should set their status. We will print their status. And basically, for lack of better words, send them back to guess again. Okay. Otherwise, guess was valid. I'm not saying it's correct, but the guess was within range. So it was a number, and that number was between, all right, that number was between 1 and 100. All right. So we know it was a valid guess, right? So we can say num guesses plus plus. So what am I doing there? I'm incrementing number of guesses. All right. Now I have to check to see if guess too low, too high, or correct. All right. A random number. That's going to be our low test. So our guess was too low. All right. And if it's too low, what do we want to do? All right. Well, we'll give them their status. So the status equals OK1, which is going to say basically the guess of, like, for example, 23. And then we're going to say was too low. Please try again. All right. So, that's all we're doing here. Okay. Otherwise, so else, if the guess was too high, now we want to say a similar thing, but instead of telling them that it was too low, we want to tell them it was too high. All right. Finally, if their guess was correct, so if it wasn't too low, if it was valid, meaning it was between 1 and 100, and it wasn't too low and it wasn't too high, they guessed it. So again, I can come up here and say guess correct. So again, we'll give them another thing in here that'll say the guess. Okay. And that's just going to say your guess was correct. You guessed it in 6, let's say, guesses. That's all let's say. And now we want to say, you guessed it, equal true. Why do we want to say you guessed it equal true? Because that's our test to see if we want to guess it, have them guess again. There's no sense in asking them to guess again. All right. They just got it. All right. So now that they've got that, we can fall out of this loop, this you guessed it loop, and now we can ask them if they want to do it again. See if user wants to play again. All right. So that input str, in fact, we don't called it again, I think. Did we call that again up here or what? Again. I don't even think we're going to need this, but we'll use again right here. So again equal prompt run program again. Again, yes or no. But just as we mentioned before, we're assuming that when we do that, the user knows that they should enter in a Y or an N. They may not be that smart. All right. So this should be here. There we go. All right. And then we want to take that. So let's take that again and make that equal to again dot to uppercase. And then our first char is going to be equal to again dot char at. We're just checking that first character. Again, all we're doing there is we're asking them if they want to play the game again. All right. So if first char equal to Y, meaning yes, they said that yes, we want to play it again. Then keep going equal true. Otherwise, keep going equal false. Now, I've got a master copy here, but I'm not lying to you. I just rewrote it while we were doing this and tried to make it run a little bit better. Plus, I cut about 10 lines off. So let's see if it works. Okay, I'm looking here. This input string, it looks like we're not using, so I can get rid of that. All right, let's try it. I'm hoping that it still works, but we'll find out right now. All right, it doesn't like it. Doesn't like something. Now, there's an error. How do I know? Because nothing's happening. So I'm going to right mouse click on here. I'm going to go down to inspect, and I'm going to go over to console. And you can see it's got some errors. All right, says main is not defined, and I'll tell you what the problem is. All right, and that is, if you remember, the name of this file is 02 guessing game, but I didn't change that to 02 dash guessing game. My hope is that's what the problem was. So I'm going to save it again, and I'm going to try to run it again. All right, guess a number between 1 and 100. I'll use the default 50. Doesn't like something now. So I'm going to debug it again. And it says guess is not defined because I called it guess and I changed it to the guess. So it looks like it's at line 100. So let's go to line 100 in our JavaScript. And it should be the guess. And I got to see any place I used guess, I got to change to the guess. So that's wrong there also. So let's hope that's what all my errors were. So again, 50, another error. Guess is not defined. I missed another one on line 105. Okay, so that's got to be the guess, which means that also has to be the guess. So did I miss any other ones? This means two. The guess. All right. Well, it didn't like there's some of my check. Notice I put in 50 and it's just telling me to do it again. So it's not printing out anything. It's just going right to boom. It's telling me to guess it again. All right. So something is wrong there. So let's take a look at it. Now this is a different kind of an error. The program isn't stopping. So this is a logic error in my program. There's really three kinds of errors that you can get in a program. You can get a syntax error. All right. So a syntax error would be like me coming in here and instead of spelling else, I spelled essay, or, I left the L out of else. That's a syntax error. Typically, the system will catch those for you. All right. You can also have what's called a runtime error, which means the system doesn't recognize it until it's done. All right. So in other words, the system says, if you try to divide by 0 or something like that. All right. And the other one's a logic error, and they're typically the hardest to find because once you start writing a program, you think, well, geez, my logic's got to be correct. So we came in here. Okay. So this was an else. First of all, if we do this, we should have checked this right away and seen if we put in a, so I'm going to try running this a couple more times, and I'm going to purposely, I'm going to leave it blank, see if we get our error. All guesses, please try again. That's good. And then it says, guess a number. I'm going to put in something out of range. Okay. And again, something out of range. Good. And again, I'll just put in hello here. All right. That part's working. So it's something after we came in here and we typed this. See that? Boom, it jumped right to the next one. So I'm missing something. So let's see if we can figure out what that is. All right, so it's in my else. I know that. So you guessed it. Oh, where am I? So let's see. Validate the guess is numeric. Okay, so if this should not be you guessed it equal true. Okay, no, because that said I guessed it and I didn't yet, or I could have, but I don't know if I did. So I add one to my number of guesses. Then I check to see, was the guess too low? Was it too high? Was it correct? So hopefully that's the problem, was that I put that in there. All right, let's try 50. Oh, it still doesn't like it. Okay, there's still something wrong in there. That's fine. So number of guesses is up by 1. That's good. If the guess was too low, you say it was too low. All right. And this should be, I know shouldn't have to do this, but keep going. I'm going to set equal to false. All right. I shouldn't have to do that. It should automatically be resetting, but it won't hurt anything to do that. Otherwise, if it's too high, I'll again say that. And here, once I guess it, now I want to say keep going equal So this is true. Yes, I want to keep going because my guess was too low. This is true because my guess was one was too high and one was too low. Otherwise, my guess was correct. All right, so I'm not printing it out. So I've got to alert the status. That's the problem. I'm not letting the user know your guess was too low or your guess was too high or whatever. I'm not letting them know that. And I have to let them know that so they can keep playing the game. All right, so we'll do it here too. Let's try it again. All right, so 50. The guess was too high. Try again. 25. The guess was too low. Try again. So I know it's got to be between 26 and 49. So I keep cutting my guess in half. So 37. Too high. So now I know it's got to be between 26 and 36. So I'm going to say 31. That's too high. So I know it's got to be 26, 27, 28, 29, or 30. One of those. So I'll try 28. That's too high. So it's got to be 26 or 27. Let's try 27. I got it. And it took me 5 guesses. Do I want to play it again? We'll play it one more time. Again, 50. That's too high. So 25. That's too low. 36. That's too high. 30. That's too low. 33. That's too low. That's too, must be 30. There it is. So there's our game. No, I don't want to play it again. All right, so one more time here, taking this in here from the top. All right. Again, this is the same interface we had before, just a simple button on it to start the game. That's it. And we came in here, and again, you'll notice, yeah, it's 130 lines, but the first 50 are all comments. Okay. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different constants. Really, the only 2 constants I needed in here were lines 54 and 55, the min and the max. That's it. If I wanted to make the game harder, I could change that from 100 to 1000. All right. So with main, these were our variables. We are both declaring our variables, which is let, followed by the variable name. And we're initializing our variables, which is equal, followed by a value. So we've got random number for our random number. You guessed it for the user guess. Keep going to continue playing. The status, which was too high, too low, or correct. The guess, which was the actual, where it says you guessed it, and I put here user guess. That isn't true. That's the user guess, true or false. You either did guess it or you didn't. The guess, this is the actual guess we're making. So notice I am taking variables that are holding numbers and I'm initializing them to 0 when I don't know their value. I'm taking Boolean variables and either initializing them to false or to true. And I'm taking string variables, which just hold text, to the empty string, which is double quote, double quote. All right, we've got, again, the guess, the number of guesses we made, whether or not we want to run this again, and the first character of how we answer whether or not we want to run this again. All right, so again, well, keep going assumes we want to play another game. And as it says there, while keep going is a shortcut for while keep going equal, equal, equal true. So we first generate a number between 1 and 100. We set the number of guesses to 0. We set the user guessed the number to false because they haven't, in this case, they haven't guessed yet. And we set the status, all right, which is basically going to say your guess was too high, your guess was too low, etc. Equal what's typically referred to as the empty string. And the empty string is just double quote with nothing in between it. All right. While we have not yet guessed it, we're going to ask the user to make a guess. That's line 88. We're asking them right there. We're prompting them to make a guess. When they make the guess, if they put in something non-numeric, or that's double pipe sign, or the guess they make is less than 1, or the guess they make is greater than 100, we just put in there that they put in a bad guess. Please try again. The number must be between 1 and 100. We print that message out. We set you guessed it to false, which really we don't have to do. It already was false up here, but it doesn't hurt. And that'll basically just ask them to guess it again. If they get down to here, they made a valid guess. We don't know if it's the correct guess, but we know the guess was valid. Oops, try that again. So the guess made was valid. In other words, it was between 1 and 100. We don't know if it's right or not. That's what we're going to check next. But since it was valid, we add 1 to our total number of guesses. Then we check if it was too low. We want to say that the guess 43 was too low. Please try again. And then we print that out and set keep going to true. All right. Otherwise, if the guess was too high, we say something like the guess of 43 was too high. Please try again. We out and we tell them to keep going. Otherwise, they guessed it. So we say basically you guessed the number 43 in 6 guesses. We print that out. Now is the only time we're setting you guessed it. We're setting it to true. Now we want to set keep going to false. So where we are putting in here keep going equal true, it's redundant. We don't really have to do that. So I'm going to remove those 2 lines. All right. We'll run it again just to make sure it still works. Now, once we get down to here, their current game is over. So we say, do you want to run the program again? I did this a little bit differently than I did it last time, just to show you there's other ways of doing it. All right. So if we put in a Y, keep going is true. If we put in anything other than a Y, it's false. All right. When I originally wrote this, mine had 150 lines in it. Nope, 149 lines in it. So I've knocked 20 lines off. All right, when I rewrote it. When I rewrote it, it's also known as refactoring the program, which is what I did. So I'm going to try to run it one last time to make sure once I took those 2 lines out, I didn't screw anything up. So we'll say 50. It's too high. 35 is too high. 22 is too low. 30 is too high. 7 is too high. 25 is too high. 23 is too low, so it's 24. Okay, so that's that game. All right, so we're going to take a break in just a moment. But before we do, let's just get set up for the last one. All right, And the last one, I'm actually going to write a little bit differently, just to show you that rather than putting everything inside of main, which is what we've done so far, all right, we're instead going to put and write different routines for everything that we're doing. And if you say, I don't get it, let's take a very quick look and then we'll take a break. All right, but I want to bring that up in here. So array numbers, there it is. Oops, there it is. So we're going to read in 5 numbers, then we're putting them into an array called numbers. Then we're going to calculate the largest number. Then we're going to calculate the smallest number. Then we're going to calculate the sum of the 5 numbers. Then the range of the numbers, which is the biggest one minus the smallest one. Then we're going to do the average, which is the sum of the numbers divided by 5. All right. So in other words, when we run this particular example right here, what I'm going to do to make it a little bit different is I'm going to write routines for each one of these things that you see with the dashes here. So rather than having everything underneath a main, which again is okay to do, but not typically the way that it's done. All right. So we're going to do that. We're going to write different routines for everything that we want to do. All right. And I'm going to show you a few different changes, etc., that we can make. So after we get done with that, all right, we're going to go and we're going to look at that fast food example. All right. Now, I'm going to put these 3 out here that I'm doing right now. And that is, I'm going to put the BMI, the guessing game, and this array program. I'm going to put them all out there under my repo. For the last one that I'm going to do, it's an assigned homework problem. I said, even though it said it's worth 100 points, I'm going to only make it worth 10. And I'm going to do it for you, but I'm not going to save it. All right. So if you watch what I'm doing and you either follow along or go back later and do it, you'll have those 10 points. All right. Then when we get done with that, we will take a few minutes and I will show you quickly the way that I did the Flexbox test. And that'll be it for the day. So it is 10:17. Take a little longer break. We're going to take till 10:30. And when we come back, we're going to write this. All right. I've got to get a new water, so I'll be back in a couple minutes. And again, we will start up again when this reaches 10:30. So I'll see you in 12 minutes. All right, I'm going to start up. It's 10:30. And as it says right here, we're to read in 5 numbers using a prompt. So really we'll have 5 prompts. After reading the numbers in, we'll put them into an array called numbers. Then we'll calculate and print out the 5 things. So this, I'm going to start here by, I'm going to create what are called global variables. If you say, I don't know what they are, you're going to be explained. They're going to look just like what we've been doing. And let me just copy this down because we're going to have number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. You'll notice I'm getting errors because it says I'm trying to redeclare the same name. But as soon as I make that a 2, that error goes away. A 3, a 4, and a 5. All right, those are going to be the 5 numbers that I'm going to read in. I'm also going to create an array that's called numbers. That looks like that. Those are my global variables. And the reason that they're called global variables is I'll be able to use them in each routine without having to do anything special. They're known program-wide. They're global to the program. All right, and that's what that means. I'm again going to have a function called main, but this time, unlike what we've been doing before, main actually will be a program driver. So main is the program driver. All right, what do I mean? All main is going to do is it's going to call different routines. All right, so it's going to call a routine called input, the 5 numbers. Then it's going to call another routine that's called put the 5 numbers into an array. Oops. Then it's going to call another routine that's going to be called find the largest number, but we're going to put that into a variable called largest number. And then we're going to have one called smallest number, and we'll set that equal to find the smallest number. Whoops. Then we'll have another one called sum of numbers. We'll set that equal to find the sum of the numbers. Then we'll have another one called range of numbers. All right, and then we'll have another one called average of numbers. And then once we've got all that, we're just going to display it. So display all array statistics. Now, one thing I want you to notice before we write this, notice that after let, this word, this word, this word, this word, and this word, these 5 words, they're all grayed out because those are all variables that have not yet been set. We're going to set the value of largest number in this routine, and then we will return it, which means once we return it, it'll be put into that variable. And the same thing with the other ones. Now, these 3 here, this one, and this one, we're not setting them equal to anything. So there's nothing to return in those cases. So let's write these routines. So the first one is called input the 5 numbers. All right. And what I'm going to do in this routine, it's going to be pretty simple. All right. I'm not going to come in here and check to make sure that they're not numeric, etc. We could do that, but I've already shown you that in the previous 2 programs. So I'm just going to come in here and do this. I'm going to say number 1 equals parse int prompt, enter a number. And I'm not even going to give it any kind of a default value. All right. And I'm going to copy this down. So it'll be number 1, number 2, number 3, and I don't need these blank spaces in there, number 4, and number 5. So we're just going to ask the user, that is, we are telling them or asking the user to input 5 numbers. And that would be number 5. Now, I'm not going to run the program now because if I did, it would work as far as it would ask me these, but it would blow up right here because it would be looking for a routine called put the 5 numbers into an array, and we don't have a routine called that yet. So we're going to make that next. Put the 5 numbers into an array. So it's pretty simple. Numbers, remember arrays start at 1 equal number 2, and then the other 3. Numbers 2 equal number 3. Numbers 3 equal number 4. And finally, numbers 4 equal number 5. So we now have our first two routines written. Our routine where we're inputting and our routine where we're putting the numbers that we input into an array. This is not the only way of, as always, of doing this stuff. I'm trying to show you what I consider to be the most straightforward way of doing things. That's my pedagogy. In other words, the way I try to teach. So the next one, and notice now, what you'll notice after we do the largest in just a minute, that won't be grayed out anymore. All right. So if I come in here now and put in that one, we've got to put the word function in front of it. All right. So there's different ways that we can do this. Okay. And I'll tell you the way I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it by doing this. I'm going to assume that the largest number is the first one. Like I said, there's different ways of doing this. So I'm going to say let largest equal numbers 0, the first one. Then I'm going to iterate, which means I'm going to go through, iterate through the rest of the array. If we find a number greater than largest, make it the new largest. All right. And there's different ways of doing this. I'm going to write a loop and I'm going to write a for loop. I could write a while or a do while, but I'm going to write a for loop. For that LCV is my loop control variable. I'm telling it to go from 1, and while it's less than numbers dot length. All right, and that's how many numbers we have. There's 5 of them. So plus LCV. And then simply, this is a real simple thing to do. If the current number is greater than largest, make it the new largest. All right. So I'm just going to change this because I've repeated the comment. So I'm just going to say iterate through the rest of the array. So if the current number, which is numbers, LCV, if it's greater than largest, then we know we've got a new largest. So largest equal numbers LCV. Finally, now we've got the biggest number once we fall out of this loop. So we want to return the largest number in the array. So I will type in return largest. That's the whole routine right there. Notice that largest is no longer, I'm surprised I didn't think it would be, I thought it would be undone or wouldn't look like that anymore. So let's see. Oh, there we go. We don't need the word let. That's the reason I'm getting that error. I don't need to make a new variable. I've already got one. Now largest will not be grayed out. Sure, make me a liar. All right. Largest equals number 0. Boom, 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 return largest. That's it. Now, usually when you do it like this, we will make another variable. So I'm going to say let, I'll just call it biggest. All right, so let biggest equals number 0. If numbers is greater than biggest equals this, and then return biggest. All right, now when you look at this, hopefully, this is the kind of thing I want you to understand. And if what I'm saying right now makes sense to you, you're on your road to being able to understand programming. All right. So we're telling it in here, we're assuming that the biggest number is the first one we inputted, but we have to check all of them. So we start at the second number and we go through the second, third, and fourth. If we find one that's greater than our current biggest number, it is now our new biggest number. All right. Now, what I mentioned though before is this, and that is I'm going to go and copy this entire routine. Everything, every line. I'm going to paste it right below. And I'm going to change the name to find the smallest. And instead of biggest, we'll call this littlest. All right, like that. And now, instead of saying greater than largest, I say less than littlest. So if the number is less than the littlest, then we've got a new littlest. So what you hopefully notice is these routines are basically the same thing, but they're coming at them from different ends. Am I looking for the largest number or am I looking for the smallest number? All right, but like I said, they're basically doing the same thing. All right, so we have now written find the largest, find the smallest. So the next one is to find the sum. That's even easier. That's easy, even easier than what we've done so far. We're steal that line, and I'm going to make a variable called the sum. Then I'm going to set equal to 0. All right. So now I'm going to start at 0. I want to add all of them, and I want to say the sum plus equal numbers LCV. Now, I went through this kind of quickly. We're not done yet, but let's I'm going to assume we have 5 numbers here. I'm going to make these up. These numbers have no significance to anything other than they're the 5 we'll use for the program. So 45, 612, negative 45, negative 443, 67, and 0. Again, those are the 5 numbers. So this is what'll be in numbers 0, numbers 1, numbers 2, numbers 3, and numbers 4. So if we play computer now, and we do first find the largest number. Now we're going to assume that's the largest number. That's what we're doing then right here in line 60. That now becomes, or I guess what we call biggest. Okay, let me move that over a little. So that's the biggest. All right, now we're coming through and we're iterating, or working our way through this. So we start here. Is that number bigger than biggest? Yes, it is. So that becomes our new biggest. Then we check the next one. Is that greater than 612? No, no, no. So we return here 612. That's exactly how the largest one works. Then let's look at the smallest, because it's basically it's the reverse. So we're going to come in here, we're going to assume this is the littlest. All right. Is that smaller than 45? No. Is that smaller than 45? Yes. So that becomes littlest. Is that smaller than negative 443? No. Is that? No. So we will return in this case negative 443. And now for the one we're doing right now for adding them, what this find the sum of the numbers is doing is it's saying 45 plus 612 plus negative 443 plus 67 plus 0. All right, so if I do my math right, what, that's 657 minus 443, so 657, it's like 214 plus 60 plus 0, 281. That'll be the sum. All right, so largest, smallest, sum. And what's left then? The range. So what's the range? The range is the biggest. Oops. The range is the biggest, which is, let me get that back again, this one minus the smallest. So that's going to return, in other words, that will return 612 minus a negative 443, which minus will mean add them. So when we add them, that means this will return what? 1055 if I did my math right. So that will be the range. Finally, when we do the average in a minute, all right, that'll be the sum, which we just said was like 281 or something like that, divided by 5. So that should be somewhere around, I don't know, 57, 58, something like that. So we've now got these three done. So let's do the range next. And that should be paren, paren. If you're calling a function, you need to put parentheses after it. So this is find the range. This is probably the easiest one of all because we just have to tell it to return the largest minus the smallest. And what did we call them? We call them largest number and smallest number. Sorry. So that'll be return the largest number minus the smallest number. And since we are using the variables here and here, my guess is they will not be grayed out anymore. They still are. I'm not sure why, but they still are. That's okay. All right, so that'll put that into the range. Then finally, with the average, we want to take our sum that we did right here and divide it by how many numbers we had, which was 5. Now we can say here divided by 5, or we can say the name of the array, which is numbers dot length, which is also 5 because there's 5 things in the array. All right. Now the only thing that's left is to print all this stuff out, and that's in here. All right. But once we write this, we're gonna have to change this line right here in just a minute. Because once we write this, I want to print out all those values. This routine doesn't know what this is, this is, this is, this is, and this is. We defined largest number, smallest number, sum of numbers, range of numbers, and average of numbers. We define them inside of main, which means that by default, unless told otherwise, they're only known to main. So since we want to use largest number, Since we want to use smallest numbers, sum of numbers, range of numbers, and average of numbers, since we want to use them in this routine, we have to do what's called pass them to the routine. So in the parentheses here, I'll put in largest number, and then next, I'll put in smallest number. Then next, I'll put in sum of numbers. Then next, I'll put in range of numbers. And finally, I'll put in average of numbers. I didn't have to put them all on separate lines like this. I didn't have to do that. I just want to make it easier for you to read it. Notice now these variable names are now not grayed out anymore. All right. Now, largest numbers, smallest number, sum of numbers, range of numbers, average of numbers. These things that are in here, they are called parameters or arguments. They're things that our display all array statistics need in order to do its job. All right. They're also called actual parameters because there's the name, there's the name, there's the name, there's the name. We're actually using the same names. But in here, when we write our routine, we can give them the same name or call them anything we want. So for largest, I'm going to put in an L. For smallest, I'm going to put in an S. For sum, I'm already using S, so I'll just call it sum. All right, for range, I'm going to use R. And for average, I'm going to use AVG. All right, so I just renamed them. These are called formal parameters. These are called actual parameters because they must match, these must match these. Here they don't have to match. All right, so I gave them different names. I could have given them the same name. All right, but it's just a little less typing. All right, so I'm going to have a variable called str that I'm creating right here. And I'm just going to keep adding to it. That should be everything. All right, except now that I've got that, I probably will want to print it out. All right, so I'm going to run this and I'm going to put in 5 valid numbers. I'm going to put in the 5 we used right here. So again, what we should have then is largest should be 612. Smallest should be negative 443. The sum, I don't remember what it was, but I think it was 281. All right. The range, again, is that minus that, which means add them. So that'll be 1,055 if I did my math right. And then finally for the average, it'll be this sum, 281 divided by 5, which, let's see, 56, something like 56.2, something like that. Let's see if indeed those are the values that we get. All right, and I could have errors in here as well. All right, so file save all, and let's run the program. Okay, doesn't like something from the get-go. Refuse to, oh, I know what it is. Same thing as before. This has got to be 03 dash. All right, so let's just start it from there and see if it gives us any better results. All right, so we need our 5 numbers. So they are 45, 612, negative 443. Again, because we didn't say they had to be, they couldn't be positive or negative, etc. All right, what were the last two? 67 and 0. Right? Not printing them out. So again, there's another error. Let's see if we can figure out what that is. Largest number is not defined at find the range of numbers. Okay, we'll fix that. Not a problem. Okay, well, remember, this is incomplete the way it is. What do I mean? Well, when we call largest, the range of the numbers, we were subtracting the largest number minus the smallest number. So it needs to know those. So largest number and smallest number. It needs to know both of those. And for our average, it needs to know the sum of our numbers. All right, and since I changed them here and here, I have to change them where I called them too. Largest is fine, smallest is fine, sum is fine, but this needs, and let's give it the same name. So largest number and smallest number. All right, and for this one, it needs sum of numbers. Let's see if that fixed it, and then we'll go back over all of it. So again, we need these 5 numbers. So 45, 612, negative 443, 67, and 0. All right. Now, that's not good. There's too much junk here, but the largest is 612. I don't know what I did there, but we'll fix it in a minute. The sum is not defined, the range is not defined, the average is not defined. So it doesn't like, that means I made a mistake in here. How's that? So let's fix it. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's good. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So those should both be okay. Find the largest. Let biggest equals number 0. All right. If the number currently in here is bigger than the biggest, all right, biggest equals numbers LCV. That should be okay. Return biggest. All right, smallest should be the same. That looks okay. The sum, that looks okay. The range, that looks okay. The average, okay, to me it looks okay. So something, but it's pretty obvious something is screwed up. So that would be largest, L, smallest, S. All right, sum, R, and AVG. Five numbers. Input the 5 numbers. Number 1. It looked like it took that okay. So let's talk about debugging. All right. I'm going to come in here after I got this thing that said input the 5 numbers. All right. I'm going to print them all out. So alert. Number 1 equals, and I'll put in plus number 1 plus, and again, that's like we hit enter, plus, and I'm just going to keep doing this so you can see everything I'm doing here. So number 2 equals plus number 2. Just like that. Now, for right now, I don't care about the rest of this program. So I'm going to grab all of these lines and I'm going to comment them out. I don't care. All right. And looks like I got an extra thing here. I don't know if that's what was doing it. Nope, that isn't it. But I'm going to comment that out as well. This will at least let me debug and see whether or not those first 5 numbers are being put in a correct manner. So again, I'm going to use my same numbers, 45, 6, 12, 443, 67, and 0. Number 1, 2, 3, they're all, that routine is working because it is giving me those numbers. That's good. That's a good start. Grab all this other junk here. I got a bunch of program runs I'm going to get rid of. There we go. All right. Now I can go in and all this that I just did, I don't need this anymore. I just proved that it worked. So I don't need any of that. All right. But now I want to call the routine to put the numbers into the array. That's this routine right here. Put the numbers into the array. After I do that, I want to make sure that it worked. So I'm going to put in a for loop. see. I'm going to make a temporary variable here just for a minute. And again, all I'm doing here is just printing out the numbers after I'm putting them in. I'm trying to make sure I'm debugging this program to try to make sure it's working. Because someplace it's breaking, and I want to see where it's breaking. All right. Four, brief. I don't know why I don't remember that other number. 612, negative 443, 67, and 0. All right. Did I not put an alert in there? If I did, let's see. I did not. So again, 45, 612, negative 443, 67, and 0. So it says the first one holds 45, then 612, minus 443, 67, and 0. All that's working. So I know now this is the process of debugging. I'm looking for errors in my program. So I know that the error isn't here, and I know the error isn't here, because both of those routines are working. Try the next one, which is find the largest number, which was in here. All right. So after I do this, I'm going to put in just an alert that says the largest number is plus largest number. And it should come back and say the largest number is 612 if it's working correctly. And again, I didn't tell it to print out, I don't think. No, I did. So alert doesn't like something that's in here. Look like he was giving me an error there. Cannot access largest number before initialization. Well, let's see. Did I spell it differently? Largest number. Oh, that alert has got to go after it, not before it. That was my fault. So 45, 612, minus 443, 67, and 0. The largest number is 612. That's working. All right, well, that's good. Let's try the smallest one. Oh, I didn't put parens there. That's probably what broke it to begin with. Needs paren there. That might be what broke it. So now let's say the smallest number. And that'll be smallest number. And this should be negative 443. So it's working. Let's do the last two just for completeness here. And again, just like we'd said, we're getting largest 612. We've gotten smallest 443. So I don't know if I did my math right, but let's do the sum next. Saved. All right, it says the sum of the numbers is undefined, so it doesn't like something in there. So let's figure out what. It didn't return it. Return the sum. It doesn't know that this even exists because I never returned it. Let's try that again. This is debugging. All right. And I'm looking at it that, believe it or not, I'm glad I'm making these errors because this is the kind of thing that's going to happen to you when you write code. All right. The sum, I guess I did do it right, is 8281. So again, just for completeness, we can now do our range and then our average. And it says the range is 1055. All right. Again, when I divide that by 5, I should get 211. It looks like something like that. All right. Didn't change what it was printing out, I guess. Oh, I still have that one in there. That's what it was. Okay. And it says the average is a 56.2. All right. which should be that number, the adding the numbers up and dividing it by 5, I guess. And finally, what's left? The display everything. So now we can undo that. All right. And we should be printing out all this stuff. And there it is. Our largest number, our smallest number, our sum, our range, and our average. Everything looks good as far as I can tell. All right, so that is that one. And again, I'm going to save these 3 problems that I've been doing. That does that if you run and use what I've done here, the problems are going to be different. But let's do the last one here. That's the homework problem. All right. So let me unzip this homework problem. Got it here unzipped already, but I'm going to unzip it again. So unzip or extract the homework. This is the homework 1 problem that's right here. All right, I want to say that again. This is the homework 1 problem that we're doing right now. This one is a little bit different, and it is a little bit different because this is more what we're moving towards in the later chapters. I'll just put it that way. That's the best way that I could put it to you. All right. So let's see. What do we have in here? Where was it? There's the homework 1. All right. So let me open that up with code. The other one that was open. All right. And again, this is our program. All right. Now, what you'll notice with this one is I gave you some CSS. I've gave you the whole HTML file. So if we run this right now, it looks like this. Okay. Is it done? No, it's not done. But that said, all right, most of the work that you have to do in here, not the JavaScript, all right, not the JavaScript, but most of the work that you have to do in here has been done for you. All right, the actual JavaScript, there's only about 10 lines. All right, but if I click this right now, nothing happens because we haven't told anything to happen. The other thing, just so you know, I was thinking about this before during the break. I could have come in here and written a media query. What is it? Boy, I'm just spacing right here. Let me grab an old media query from my other stash here. All right, so add media, and I'm going to say here max width of 768 pixels. I'm literally doing this off the top of my head, but I'm going to say font size, and I'm going to make it about 60%. You'll see why in just a second. All right, so font size, and what do I want to change? It's all of the it's all of these. So I just want to change the font size to 50%. And the reason I'm doing that, I'm not going to save this yet, but you'll notice if I take this and shrink it down, how the words disappear here. All right, see how they come back, but they're disappeared here. So I'm thinking, I don't even know if 50% is enough, but cutting it down like that. No, it still is not big enough. All right, or it's too big, whatever way you want to look at it. So I'm going to cut it down to 33%. All right, now it's very hard to read, but it is burgers, fries, and sodas. You can actually see that now. All right, so let's write the JavaScript. Right now, the comment's in there, but there's nothing else other than this. If you remember before, this is an alias. So make the $sign an alias for the following. Document dot get elements by I. That's all it is. Again, I'm not saving this one here. So if you want this one, code along with me. All right, even if you have to go back and rewatch it. Like I said, after this, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, about 12 lines. So it's not like I'm asking you to do a boatload of stuff here. All right. Now, this is stuff we're going to be learning. So why he asked you to do it this way, I don't for the life of me know, but they did. So this is saying I've got a button. All right. And the name of that button is BTN click. Okay. When I click that button, this is what I want to have happen. This is what I'm telling it right now. Like I said, I would never have expected you guys to understand this stuff now. I don't know why they did it like this, but they did. All right. I'm going to create my constants. So I'm going to have a const that's going to be called burgers. Heck, let's do those first. We'll call this burgers. And that's going to be equal to 1.0. What that means is every burger, every hamburger costs $1. Const fries equal 2.0. So every order of fries is $2, and every soda is $2.50. All right, I can put another 0 on each of these. It doesn't matter one way or the other. Now, what I am going to do, because this is the way I wrote it, and it's a crummy way of writing it, I'm not going to put that code here. I'm going to put it up on top. So those are my three constants right there. So I'm going to say here, declare and initialize program constants. So there's three of them. Burgers, which as you can see, have this cost, fries, which have this cost, and sodas, which have this cost. All right. Okay. Then I want to put the code in here so that when we run the program, it's going to see whatever we put in those three text boxes, and whatever we put in those three text boxes. So let's say that I bought one of each. I bought one burger, one fry, and one soda. It'll say 1 times 1 plus 1 times 2 plus 1 times 250. So if I put a 1 in for each one, it should be $5.50. That's what should happen. All right, so I'm going to have a const here for burgers, and that's equal to parse int All right. In English, what this is saying, because it may make no sense to you. This is saying what I want you to do is to grab the value in that first text box, all right? And I want you to put that into burgers. But if that value that you put in there is empty, put a 0 in there. That's all it's saying. All right, so let me do this. We've got burgers, we've got fries, and we've got sodas. So this will be fries, not fires, fries, and this will be sodas. All right. So that's the next thing. So then we're going to say we'll make it a const total cost. That's going to be everything. That equals burgers. So that's how many burgers I bought times burgers. So times 1 plus fries. That's how many fries we bought times fries. So that's times 2 plus sodas times sodas. That's going to be my cost right there. So the only thing to do, so let's see right here. So let's get values from text boxes or set to 0 if text box is empty. Here is calculate total cost. And next, we want to print out the total cost. That's it. So set up area to hold the total cost. All right, so that'll be const output div equal, and I'll go back over all of this in just a minute. Print it. Print out total cost, and it'll be output div dot inner HTML equal, we'll put it into a paragraph, and it'll just say total cost dot to fixed to, and I have to just end my paragraph tag. That's everything. Now let's see if it works. So file, save all, then we'll take a minute and go back over it. We need our HTML file. All right, so let's say we bought one of each. One. So that should be what? That should be $1 plus $2, which is $3 plus $2.50. So 1 and 1 should give me $5.50 if I did this right. 1. Did I do it right? Let's see. This was $1. This was $2. This was $2.50. $2.50, $4.50. Looks like the cost isn't right, but let me double check. Burgers, fries, sodas. Burgers, fries, sodas, burgers, fries, sodas. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Why is it giving me a wrong number? Total cost, burgers times burgers. That should have been 1 times 1 times 2. So that should have been $1 plus $2. Should have been $3.50 plus 1 times $2.50. Should have been $5.50, but it gave us $6.50. Let's just do it this way. This is how we'll test it. All right. We will put in a 1 here. So that should be $1. We're not going to put anything here. Okay, it's saying 350, so it's adding the 250 there. All right, so it's adding the sodas. Why would it be doing that? Let's leave them all blank. All right, I'm going to refresh. Nothing is filled in, and I'm getting 250 regardless, so that's a problem. There it is. That should have been times. Okay, let's see if that fixed everything. Again, if I run this and put in 1 for each, 1, 1, 1, that should be 550, and it is. If I run it again and I'll put in 3 there, so that should be $3, 2 there, so that should be $4. 3 plus 4 is 7, plus 250 should be 950. So it's now working. All right, so let's take a quick look at the program code. Again, I did add a media query, but that's very hard to read. I get it. I probably just want to change the size of these. That's all. That would have probably made it much easier. So when I did this and created that media query for this, I really shouldn't have done that. I should rather do this. I'll say here with, which we previously had set to 20%. Let's set it to 33.3%. See if that's readable now. So again, we'll put in 1, 2, 3 and run it. Now let's knock it down in size. There, now you can still read that. And let's go back and refresh it. Okay, it's got to be bigger than it is. Let's bump it up to 50. That should be plenty. All right. Oh, it's still a little small, but you get the idea, I think. So 1, 2, 3. There's our cost. Okay, if I made it a little bit bigger than it is, it would be fine then. All right. So that should work. All right, so very quickly then to go over this, the styles I'm not going to run over with you. I've given you these already. You don't have to put in a media query. You can put that one in if you want to. You do not have to. All right. The index, the only thing I'd mention on this is where did I get those names from? There's the name burgers. There's the name fries. There's the name sodas. All right. Here's our JavaScript file. I just put it out on the bottom. And there's everything. Like I said, there's not much code here. I declared and initialized 3 program constants. Some people would say that I used bad programming practice because the name of my constant, which is the cost, is the exact same name as the name of my variables, except the case is different. So we could have said cost burgers cost fries, and cost soda. That would have been cleaner, which means I would have to change all of these to cost burgers plus cost fries plus cost sodas. All right, but it should still work. So what have we done in here? We have created three constants: cost of our burgers, or cost of our fries, cost of our sodas. We made an alias in here. So rather than saying document.getElement by ID, we only need to use the $sign. So right here, this is a shortcut for saying document.getElement by ID. All right, we're saying when we click the button that's called BTN click, and where is that button? BTN click, right? So when we click it, we're saying grab whatever value was in the first text box and put it into burgers. If there is no value, put in a 0. Those are all three of these are number fields, so I don't have to check for non-numeric input, only for blank input, which is what they're doing here and here and here. Then we're calculating the total cost. The number of burgers times 1 plus the number of fries times 2 plus the number of sodas times 250. All right. Then this is the area, this output thing that's right here. All right. There, where is there an ID called output? It is right here. All right. And we're telling it to print it out there with 2 decimal places. So that is everything. Now, it is kind of late. It's 11:39. I will very quickly show you, and I mean very quickly, my Flexbox test. All right. You may or may not remember, this is mine. All right. And when I shrink it down, I didn't do anything with these, but it does shrink down to 1 column, which is what I was looking for. So the way that this is set up, I'm going to show it to you, but very quickly. All right. I came in there and there's my navigation menu, nothing new there. Then I had the hero section. And actually, it's the sale part. And I just grabbed the picture from the actual website for PetSmart. And then I grabbed some of the PetSmart stuff in there. All right. And put that in. Okay. And then I had the pictures of our team, I grabbed 4 pictures of animals. All right. But probably what you're more interested in then is the CSS, which is right here. All right. Set the body stuff up. The header, I had a display flex, so I could change it from row to column. Did the justify content space between, so it evened out. The navigation menu, also again, a display flex, as I mentioned, so it can change from row to column. List style none to get set it up initially as column. All right, I mean, padding and stuff I'm not going to go over. This is these are the links. So I took away the text decoration, gave them a color, a font weight, and this is all aesthetic stuff, so it would line up. I made the header sticky, which means it wouldn't move. It would stay at the top all the time. That is a way of doing it. Then for our hero section, again, a display flex, told it to display as column. All right, justify content space between. Our main section, display flex, flex direction column. Each one of the sections was set up like this. All right, this was the divs. Again, most of this is very simplistic stuff. The hero, again, display flex. And for the media query, I had a little bit of some stuff in here. The hero image, I put some margin top because it looked funky otherwise. Then with a minimum width of 600, did a flex wrap. All right, and for a minimum width of 1200, set the flex direction to row. All right, so in other words, when it was a big screen, my 3 products would show all on one line, and my 4 animals would each show on one line. But when it was smaller, all right, they would show, each one would be on its own line. And that's it. All right. Thank you for those of you who have stuck with me. Tomorrow will be your test. It will be sent to you by 7 a.m. I would recommend you read it first. If you want to start on it beforehand, that's fine. I will go over it tomorrow from 8:05 a.m. until 8:20 a.m. Until then, I will see you tomorrow. Have a good rest of your day. Thanks.